The stars were dying. One by one, across the galaxy, entire worlds went silent. Ambassador Tira stood alone in the observation room of the great station and watched another light disappear from the map. That was the 17th colony in 3 months. Millions of her people gone in an instant. Eaten alive by the things that came from the dark. The Krath had no mercy. They had no reason. They were simply hungry, and the galaxy was their food. Tira pressed her thin fingers against the cold glass and tried to remember what hope felt like. Her people, the Villani, had lived in peace for 10,000 years. They had built beautiful cities on 100 worlds. They had created art and music and poetry. They had never needed weapons because they had never faced an enemy they could not reason with. But the Krath did not reason. The Krath only consumed. The door behind her opened with a soft sound. Fleet Commander Olin walked in slowly. His pale skin glowed with a nervous blue light, the way it always did when he was afraid. Tira did not blame him for being afraid. Everyone was afraid now. "The Council is waiting," Olin said quietly. "They want to discuss our options." Tira almost laughed. Options? What options did they have? Their ships were fast but weak. Their weapons could not pierce the thick shells of Krath bioships. Their soldiers had never trained for real combat. The Galactic Coalition had forgotten how to fight a long time ago. "Let them wait," she said. "I need a moment." Olin walked to stand beside her. Together, they watched the stars. So many of them were already dark. So many more would follow. "There is something we have not tried," Olin said after a long silence. His voice was barely a whisper, as if he was afraid to speak the words out loud. "Something the old records mention. A sealed world. A place we have avoided for 3,000 years. Tira's 4 eyes widened. She knew exactly what he meant. Every child in the Coalition learned the stories. Every species knew the warnings. Sol 3, the third planet from a small yellow star at the edge of known space. A world so dangerous that the Coalition had placed a barrier around the entire system and forbidden all contact. A world where life itself was a weapon, where the very air could kill, where creatures fought and died and killed each other in an endless cycle of violence. Earth, home of the humans. "You cannot be serious," Tira said. "I am completely serious." Olin turned to face her. His glow had shifted to a deep red, the color of determination. "I have studied the old records. The humans are exactly what we need. They evolved under conditions that would kill any of us in hours. Heavy gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme temperatures, deadly predators, constant natural disasters. They are built for survival, built for war. They are monsters," Tira said. "The records are clear. They fight wars against their own kind. They create weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. They hunt other species for sport. They eat the flesh of animals." "Yes," Olin agreed. "They are all of those things. But they are also alive. They survived their Deathworld when they should have died. They grew strong instead of weak. And right now, we need someone strong." Tira turned away from the window. Her mind was racing with terrible possibilities. Inviting humans into Coalition space was like opening the door to a pack of wild beasts. Even if they helped destroy the Krath, what would stop them from turning on the Coalition next? But what choice did they have? The Krath would reach the core worlds in 60 days. After that, there would be nothing left to protect. "The Council will never agree," she said. "The Council is desperate," Olin replied. "Desperate people do desperate things." The Council chamber was massive. Representatives from 100 species sat in floating chairs arranged in a great circle. They were all afraid. Tira could see it in their eyes, their movements, the colors of their skin. They were watching their civilization collapse, and they had no idea how to stop it. Tyra took her place at the center of the room. She activated the holographic display and showed them the map. All those dark stars. All those dead worlds. We have one option left, she said. Her voice echoed through the silent chamber. One chance. But it comes with a risk greater than any we have faced before. She told them about Earth. She told them about humans. She showed them the old records, the videos of human wars, the images of their terrible weapons. She watched the fear spread through the chamber like a disease. They are primitives, said one representative. They have not even discovered faster-than-light travel. They were primitives when we sealed their system, Tira corrected. That was 3,000 years ago. We have no idea what they have become. This is madness, said another. We would be trading one apocalypse for another. Perhaps, Tira said. But the Krath are certain death. The humans are only possible death. I would rather take my chances with possibility than certainty. The vote took 3 hours. Arguments flew back and forth like weapons. Species threatened to withdraw from the coalition. Representatives wept openly. But in the end, fear won. Fear of the Krath was greater than fear of humans. By the smallest margin in coalition history. The vote passed. Tira returned to the observation room alone. She stared at the sealed region of space where Earth waited in silence. For 3,000 years, humanity had been trapped there, growing and changing in ways no one could predict. Now she was about to set them free. She activated the communication array and began to record the message. Simple words. Basic ideas. A plea for help that would travel across the stars to a world of monsters. To the people of Sol 3, she said, her voice trembling. We are dying. We face an enemy we cannot defeat. We know you have no reason to help us. We know we abandoned you long ago. But we beg you, please, save us. The message launched into the void, and Tira waited for the monsters to answer. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of the warship Mongryong and read the alien message for the 5th time. The words were simple. The meaning was clear. Somewhere out there in the darkness, an entire civilization was begging for help. She should have felt something. Anger, maybe, at the aliens who had locked humanity inside their own solar system for 3,000 years. Or satisfaction that those same aliens now needed human help. Or fear at what they might find when they finally left Earth behind. Instead, she felt only calm. This was what humans did. This was what they were made for. Captain, said Lieutenant Dahan from his station. The translation is confirmed. This signal came from outside the barrier. From coalition space. Yuna nodded slowly. The barrier. That invisible wall of energy that had surrounded the Sol system for longer than human civilization had existed. For centuries, humans had wondered what it was. Then they had learned. The galaxy was afraid of them. Afraid of their strength, their violence, their ability to survive things that would kill any other species. Earth was a prison. Humanity was the prisoner. Has command responded? Yuna asked. Yes, Captain. Dohan pulled up the message on the main screen. Third Fleet is authorized to deploy. All 12 carriers. 400 combat vessels. Full military force. Executive Officer Jia raised an eyebrow. She was a tall woman with sharp eyes and a scar on her left cheek from a training accident years ago. That is everything we have. Everything that is ready for deployment. Command knows what is at stake, Yuna said. This is our chance. Our only chance. For 3,000 years, we have been trapped here. For 3,000 years, we have been called monsters by species that have never met us. She turned to face her crew. Today, we prove them wrong. Today, we show the galaxy what humanity really is. The bridge crew straightened in their seats. Pride filled their faces. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. Every human soldier had. The barrier came down 3 weeks after the message arrived. Yuna never learned exactly how it happened. Some said human scientists finally cracked the code. Others said the coalition lowered it themselves in desperation. It did not matter. What mattered was that the stars were suddenly open, and humanity was finally free. The Third Fleet assembled in orbit around Earth. 12 massive carriers, each one large enough to hold a city. 400 destroyers, cruisers, and battleships, bristling with weapons that would make the coalition tremble. 200,000 soldiers, trained since birth to fight and win against any enemy. Yuna looked at the fleet from the observation deck of the Mongryong and felt her heart swell with emotion. This was humanity's answer to the galaxy. This was what 3,000 years of isolation had created. Not peace, not weakness, but strength beyond imagination. The journey to coalition space took 2 weeks at maximum speed. Human ships were not elegant like the curved vessels Yuna had seen in old coalition records. They were brutal things, built from heavy metal and powered by engines that burned like small suns. They were ugly and loud and absolutely terrifying. Yuna loved them. Sergeant Taeyan spent the journey in the training bay with the rest of his unit. 10,000 Marines, all preparing for a war unlike anything humanity had faced before. The Krath were not human enemies. They were not enemies that could be reasoned with or frightened or convinced to surrender. They were pure hunger given form. Taeyan checked his rifle for the 100th time. It was a simple weapon by human standards. Chemical propellant firing metal slugs at high velocity. Ancient technology. But it worked on anything that bled, and according to the reports, the Krath definitely bled. "You think we can take them?" asked Private Mina from beside him. She was young, barely 20 years old, with nervous eyes and steady hands. "First deployment." "I know we can," Taeyan said. "Humans have been killing things bigger and meaner than us since we lived in caves. We hunted creatures that could crush us with one step. We survived ice ages and plagues and world wars. We are not going to lose to some oversized bugs." Mina smiled weakly. "You make it sound easy. Nothing is easy." Taeyan loaded a fresh magazine into his rifle with a satisfying click. "But we do it anyway. That is what makes us human." On the bridge, Captain Yuna received continuous updates from Coalition space. The news was bad and getting worse. The Krath had taken 3 more systems since the message was sent. 30 million Coalition citizens were dead or missing. The enemy fleet numbered in the millions of bioships, each one a living weapon of chitin and acid. The Coalition had sent what ships they could spare to slow the advance. It was not enough. It was never enough. Their weapons were too weak and their soldiers too soft. "They have never fought a real war," Yuna said quietly to Jia as they studied the tactical display. "Look at their formations. Look at their weapons. They are playing at combat like children playing with toys." "They do not know any better," Jia replied. "They evolved on paradise worlds. Soft gravity, perfect weather, no predators. They never needed to fight. Then they are lucky we did." The Third Fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Volani space. For a long moment, there was silence as human sensors swept the area, mapping everything within range. Then, the communication array lit up with incoming signals. The Coalition wanted to talk. Yuna straightened her uniform and activated the main screen. The face that appeared was alien in every way. 4 eyes, pale purple skin, features that seemed to flow like water. "Ambassador Tira of the Volani." "Captain Yuna," Tira said. Her voice trembled slightly through the translator. We are grateful you came. We were not certain you would. You called for help, Una said simply. We answered, but after everything we did. Tira looked away. We sealed your world. We called you monsters. We left you alone in the dark for 3,000 years. Una was quiet for a moment. She thought about all the generations of humans who had lived and died inside the barrier. All the dreams of reaching the stars that had been crushed by fear. All the anger and frustration and pain. Then she thought about the millions of innocent aliens dying right now because the Krath were hungry. What you did was wrong, Una said finally. And we will discuss it when this war is over. But right now, your people are dying. Our people do not ignore suffering, Ambassador. Not even from those who wronged us. Tira stared at her with all four eyes. Something changed in her expression. Something that might have been hope. Show us your enemy, Una said, and we will end them. The Coalition observation station hung in orbit above the Villani homeworld like a delicate glass flower. Ambassador Tira stood at the viewing window with a dozen representatives from other species, all waiting to see the humans arrive. They had studied the records. They knew what to expect. Dangerous creatures from a dangerous world. Violent and primitive and barely civilized. Tira had prepared herself for monsters. She was not prepared for what actually appeared. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a wall of metal rising from the void. One moment the space was empty. The next moment it was filled with ships so large and so dark that they blocked out the stars themselves. That cannot be correct, whispered Commander Olin beside her. His pale skin had gone completely white with shock. Those readings must be wrong. Tira checked the sensors herself. They were not wrong. The largest human ship was 3 kilometers long. 3 kilometers of solid metal covered in weapons and armor and engines that burned with the heat of a sun. It was not elegant or beautiful. It was brutal and terrifying and absolutely real. Coalition warships were built for speed. They were light and curved and quick, designed to avoid damage rather than absorb it. The largest Coalition vessel ever built was barely a quarter the size of the human flagship, and the humans had brought 12 of those monsters, plus 400 smaller ships that were still larger than anything the Coalition had ever created. They should not be able to move, said one of the alien representatives. A small furry creature from a low-gravity world. That much mass would require engines we do not have. Power sources we cannot imagine. They are Deathworlders, Tira said quietly. They come from a world with heavy gravity. Weight is not a problem for them. The communication array crackled to life. A human voice came through the speakers, calm and clear and completely unafraid. Coalition Station, this is Captain Una of the United Earth Defense Force warship Mongryong. We are here to help. Please transmit all tactical information regarding the Krath threat. Tira walked to the communication console on shaking legs. Her hearts were beating so fast she thought she might collapse. She had spent her entire life believing humans were primitive savages, barely capable of leaving their own planet. Now she was looking at a fleet that could probably destroy the entire Coalition in a single battle. Captain Una, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. I am Ambassador Tira of the Villani. We are grateful for your presence. I am transmitting our tactical data now. There was a pause as the information transferred. Tira watched the human ships slowly move into formation around the station. They moved with purpose and precision, like predators surrounding prey. She wondered if this was how the Krath's victims felt in the moments before they died. Then the human captain spoke again, and Tira felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Is this all of them? Una asked. 2 million bioships? That is your enemy? Tira did not understand the question. Yes, Captain. 2 million Krath vessels have been detected. They have already destroyed 17 of our colony worlds. They are advancing toward the core at a rate of 2 million, Una repeated. She sounded almost disappointed. We brought 400 ships. I was hoping for a challenge. The observation deck went completely silent. Every alien present stared at the speaker with expressions of pure disbelief. 2 million enemy ships against 400, and the humans thought it would be easy? Captain, Olin said carefully, I do not think you understand the scale of this threat. The Krath have consumed entire civilizations. Their bioships regenerate damage faster than our weapons can cause it. Their warriors fight without fear of death. We have lost every engagement with them. I have reviewed your combat records, Una replied. Your weapons are designed to disable, not destroy. Your ships are built to flee, not fight. Your soldiers have never faced a real enemy. Her voice was not cruel, but it was brutally honest. You do not know how to wage war, Ambassador. We do. Tira felt her face flush with shame. Everything the human said was true. The Coalition had forgotten violence. They had evolved beyond it, or so they had believed. Now they were learning that evolution was not always progress. What would you have us do? Tira asked quietly. Stay behind our lines, Una said. Provide intelligence and support. And watch. The human fleet began to move. Slowly at first, then faster. The massive ships accelerated toward the front lines where the Krath were advancing. Coalition vessels scattered out of their path like small fish fleeing from sharks. Tira requested permission to transfer to a Coalition scout ship that would follow the human fleet at a safe distance. She needed to see this with her own eyes. She needed to understand what humanity really was. The journey took 4 hours. During that time, Tira reviewed everything she could find about human military history. She read about their ancient wars, fought with swords and spears and arrows. She read about their industrial wars, fought with guns and bombs and machines. She read about their nuclear weapons, devices capable of destroying entire cities in a single flash of light. She read about their willingness to die for causes they believed in. Their ability to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. Their strange combination of violence and compassion. Cruelty and kindness. She began to understand why the Coalition had feared them so much. When the scout ship reached the observation point, Tira looked out at the battlefield and felt her breath catch in her throat. The Krath swarm stretched across the void like a living cloud. Millions of bioships, each one a nightmare of chitin and claws and hunger. They had consumed everything in their path. They had never been stopped, and across from them, small and alone against that endless swarm, waited the human fleet. 412 ships against 2 million. They are insane, Olin whispered beside her. They will be destroyed in minutes. Tira was not so certain. She had read the human histories. She had seen what they could do when they were pushed into a corner. She had learned the one thing that made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. Humans did not know how to give up. Captain Una, Tira said over the communication channel. The Krath are advancing. Engagement will begin in approximately 10 minutes. Thank you, Ambassador, Una replied. Her voice was still calm, still unafraid. Please maintain a safe distance. Things are about to get loud. The human fleet spread into a wide formation. Their weapons began to glow with building energy. Across the void, the Krath swarm surged forward, eager to consume these new prey. Tira gripped the armrest of her chair and prayed to gods she had not believed in for centuries. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The Krath came forward like a wave of darkness. 2 million bioships moving as one, driven by hunger and instinct. They had devoured civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. They had never faced an enemy they could not consume. They had never faced humans. Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of the Mondrian and watched the enemy approach on the tactical display. She felt no fear. Fear was something that happened before battle. Once the fighting started, there was only the work. "All ships report ready," said Lieutenant Dohan. "Weapons charged. Fighters standing by. Marines are in the drop base." Yuna nodded. "Open a channel to the fleet." The communication array hummed as it connected every human ship in the formation. 200,000 soldiers and crew, all waiting for her words. "This is Captain Yuna," she said. "Today, we make history. For 3,000 years, the galaxy called us monsters. They feared us. They locked us away. They forgot that we even existed." She paused. "Today, we remind them why they were right to be afraid." A roar erupted from the crew around her. Pride and fury and determination, all mixed together into a sound that shook the deck plates. "Show them what humans can do," Yuna said. "All ships fire at will." The human fleet lit up like a second sun. Plasma lances, thick beams of superheated matter, cut through the void at the speed of light. They struck the first wave of Krath bioships and burned through them like fire through paper. Chitin armor that had stopped every coalition weapon simply vaporized. Kinetic rounds followed. Simple metal slugs, accelerated to a fraction of light speed, punched through bioships by the dozen. The Krath regeneration could not keep up with the damage. Holes appeared in their flesh faster than they could heal. Nuclear missiles launched from the larger carriers. They flew deep into the swarm before detonating in chains of atomic fire. The explosions were silent in the vacuum of space, but the destruction was absolute. Thousands of bioships died in each flash of light. The Krath tried to respond. They fired acid and biological projectiles at the human ships. They launched smaller creatures to claw at the metal hulls. They swarmed forward with mindless aggression, trying to overwhelm with numbers alone. It was not enough. Human armor was too thick. Human weapons were too strong. Human soldiers were too determined. Sergeant Tayan stood in the drop bay of the assault carrier, sunset, and listened to the battle through his helmet radio. He heard the screams of Krath dying by the thousands. He heard the cheers of human gunners celebrating direct hits. He heard the calm voice of his commanding officer giving the order he had waited his entire life to hear. "Marines, prepare for boarding action. We are taking the fight to the enemy." The bay doors opened. Below them, far below, a massive Krath hive ship drifted in the chaos of battle. It was the size of a city, covered in bioweapons and armored in layers of chitin, so thick that even human plasma could not burn through it. So humans would destroy it from the inside. Tayan jumped. 10,000 Marines fell through the void, their powered armor protecting them from the cold and the radiation. They fell like metal rain, guided by small thrusters toward the surface of the hive ship. Some were caught by Krath defensive fire. Some were grabbed by flying creatures and torn apart. Most made it through. Tayan hit the chitin hull with a crash that would have killed an unarmored human. He felt the impact ripple through his bones and laughed. Pain meant he was still alive. Pain meant he could still fight. His rifle came up. A Krath warrior appeared before him, all claws and mandibles and hunger. He fired 3 rounds into its center mass. The creature fell. Around him, other Marines were landing and fighting. Explosions marked the places where they were blowing holes in the hull. Screams marked the places where Krath were dying. "Push forward," shouted Lieutenant Hana over the radio. "Find the core and plant the charges. We have 30 minutes. Tayan moved. He ran across the living surface of the hive ship, firing at everything that moved. Krath warriors died before him. Krath workers died beside him. Smaller creatures tried to crawl up his legs and were crushed beneath his armor boots. Private Mina appeared at his side, her rifle smoking from constant fire. "There are so many of them." "There are more of us," Taeyeon replied. He was not speaking about numbers. He was speaking about spirit, about the will to fight, about the fire that burned inside every human heart. The Marines reached the core in 22 minutes. It was a massive chamber filled with organic machinery and thousands of craft drones. The walls pulsed with a sick light. The air, even filtered through their helmets, smelled of death. "Plant the charges," Taeyeon ordered. "Everyone has 2 minutes." They moved fast. Explosive devices locked onto the walls and floor and ceiling. Krath warriors poured in from every direction, desperate to stop them. Marines died, but the charges were planted. "All units fall back." Lieutenant Hana shouted. "Extraction in 3 minutes." Taeyeon ran. He grabbed a wounded soldier and dragged them toward the extraction point. He fired his rifle with one hand, killing Krath that got too close. His armor was cracked and bleeding in a dozen places. He did not care. The dropship appeared above them. Marines leaped and climbed and were pulled aboard. The ship lifted away from the hive ship just as the charges detonated. The core exploded in a bowl of fire. The hive ship shuddered and broke apart. 1,000,000 Krath died in an instant. Taeyeon watched from the dropship window and smiled. On her scout ship, far from the battle, Ambassador Tira could not believe what she was seeing. The human fleet was winning. Not just winning, but dominating. They were tearing through the Krath swarm like a blade through soft flesh. Bioships that had survived every coalition weapon were being destroyed by the dozen. Hive ships that had consumed entire worlds were being boarded and detonated. And the humans were singing. Their voices echoed over the open communication channels. Battle songs and war hymns and ancient melodies from a time before they had even learned to write. They were dying by the hundreds, but they were singing as they died. "They are not afraid," Olin whispered beside her. "How are they not afraid?" Tira understood now. She finally understood why the Coalition had sealed Earth, why they had hidden from humanity for 3,000 years, why they had called them monsters. It was not because humans were violent. Every species could be violent. It was because humans were not afraid of violence. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 2,000,000 Krath bioships had been reduced to floating debris. The swarm that had consumed 17 worlds was gone. The human fleet had lost 31 ships and 4,000 soldiers. Captain Yuna looked at the casualty reports and frowned. "Unacceptable losses. We need better tactics for the next engagement." Ambassador Tira listened to those words and felt something she had never felt before. Terror. Pure, absolute terror. Because she knew now that this was just the beginning. The war lasted 3 years. In that time, humanity pushed the Krath back across 40 star systems. They liberated worlds that the Coalition had given up for dead. They fought in the empty void between stars and on the burning surfaces of dying planets. They adapted and improved and learned with every battle. And they won. Again and again and again, they won. Admiral Yuna, no longer just a captain after 2 years of unbroken victories, stood on the observation deck of the Mongryong and watched the final Krath hive world burn below her. Massive orbital strikes had shattered its surface. Landing forces were sweeping through the ruins, destroying the last pockets of resistance. It was over. The enemy that had threatened to consume the entire galaxy was gone. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she only felt tired. The door opened behind her. Ambassador Tira walked in slowly, her movements careful and quiet. They had spent a lot of time together over the past 3 years. Tira had served as the main link between human forces and the Coalition. She had watched every battle. She had seen everything. The council has called an emergency session, Tira said. They want to discuss what happens next. Yuna nodded without turning around. I expected this. They are afraid of you, Tira said quietly. They have been afraid since the first battle. Every victory made them more afraid. They should be afraid. Yuna finally turned to face the alien ambassador. Her eyes were hard but not cruel. We did something in 3 years that your coalition could not do in 3 centuries. We destroyed an enemy that was going to consume every living thing in the galaxy. We saved billions of lives. And lost 50,000 of your own people doing it, Tira said. I know the numbers. I have studied your casualty reports. We knew the cost when we came here. Yuna walked to the viewing window and looked down at the dying world. Humans have always been willing to die for what they believe in. For their families. For their friends. For strangers they have never met. Tira joined her at the window. For a long moment, they stood in silence. Why did you come? Tira asked finally. After everything the coalition did to your people. The barrier. The isolation. 3,000 years of being treated like monsters. You had every reason to let us die. Yuna was quiet for a while. She thought about all the humans who had given their lives in this war. Soldiers like Sergeant Taeyeon, who had survived 100 boarding actions before finally falling in battle on a Krath colony world. Officers like Lieutenant Dohun, who had died defending a coalition civilian transport from a surprise attack. Thousands of men and women who had never seen Earth again. Because that is who we are, Yuna said at last. Yes, humans are violent. Yes, we fight and kill and sometimes destroy. But we also protect. We build. We create. We look at suffering and we cannot turn away. She faced Tira with an expression that was almost gentle. Your coalition looked at our world and saw only monsters. You saw our wars and our weapons and our violence. You were so afraid of what we might do that you never asked what we could do. What we would do if given the chance. And what is that? Tira asked. We would die for strangers, Yuna said simply. We would cross the galaxy to help people we have never met. We would fight battles that are not ours because the alternative is watching innocent people suffer. She smiled slightly. That is the secret of humanity, Ambassador. We are not just destroyers. We are protectors. We just protect very, very aggressively. The council session lasted for hours. Representatives from 100 species argued about what to do with the humans. Some wanted to seal Earth again, terrified of what might happen if humanity remained free. Others wanted full alliance, recognizing that humans had saved their civilization. Admiral Yuna sat quietly through it all. She did not argue or threaten or demand. She simply waited. Finally, the vote was called. And for the first time in coalition history, the result was unanimous. Humanity would be welcomed as full members of the Galactic Coalition. Trade agreements would be signed. Borders would be opened. The barrier around Seoul would be permanently dismantled. 3,000 years of isolation were finally over. That night, Admiral Yuna stood alone on the bridge of the Mongryong. The ship was in orbit around the Coalition capital world, surrounded by vessels from 100 different species. Human and alien crews were celebrating together on stations throughout the system. Commander Jia found her there, staring out at the stars. You should be at the celebration, Jia said. I will be soon. Yuna did not look away from the window. I just needed a moment. Jia stood beside her old friend. What are you thinking about? Everyone we lost. Yuna's voice was soft. 50,000 soldiers. Men and women who believed in what we were doing. Who knew they might not come home but went anyway. She paused. I keep wondering if it was worth it. Of course it was worth it, Jia said firmly. We saved billions of lives. We freed our people from isolation. We showed the galaxy that humans are more than monsters. I know. Yuna finally turned away from the stars. I just wish I could tell them. All the ones who died. I wish I could let them know that their sacrifice meant something. Gia put a hand on her shoulder. They knew. That is why they went. Yuna nodded slowly. She thought about Sergeant Tyan, who had once told her that humans would fight as long as there was something worth fighting for. She thought about all the soldiers who had sung war songs as they charged into battle. She thought about the strange, wonderful, terrible species that had crawled out of a Deathworld and reached for the stars. We did something incredible, she said quietly. Something no one believed we could do. We answered a call for help from people who had hurt us, and we saved them anyway. That is humanity, Gia said. For better or worse. That is what we are. Outside the window, human ships flew alongside coalition vessels in a galaxy that would never forget what had happened. The Krath were gone. The barrier was down. A new age was beginning. And at the heart of it all, the people of Earth had proven what they had always known about themselves. They were monsters, yes. But they were monsters that protected. Monsters that built. Monsters that loved. And that made all the difference. 3 months later, the first human colony ship left Earth for coalition space. It carried 10,000 settlers, all eager to explore the stars their ancestors had dreamed about for millennia. They brought with them seeds and animals and art and music. They brought their violence and their compassion. They brought everything that made them human. Admiral Yuna watched them go from the bridge of the Mongryong. She was smiling. What are you thinking? Gia asked. Yuna laughed softly. I am thinking about what the galaxy is going to look like in 100 years. 1,000 years. With humans spreading out among the stars, building and creating and protecting. Probably chaos, Gia said dryly. Probably, Yuna agreed. But beautiful chaos. The kind of chaos that makes everything better, even when it is messy and loud and difficult. She turned away from the window and walked toward the door. There was work to do. There was always work to do. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt something like hope. The galaxy had called for salvation. Humanity had answered, and nothing would ever be the same again.